Maybe this is the year. This would upend the field. It would be the biggest discovery of the CERN LHC. I think the biggest discovery in particle physics.
Something broke the silence at CERN, and it wasn't a particle. A claim is circulating.
The world's most powerful particle accelerator, the Large Hadron Collider, will reopen today after 3 years of being shut down for improvements.
A predictive AI at the Large Hadron Collider supposedly vetoed a collision, warning of a catastrophic reality state violation. The team ignored it, and a strange, coherent signal answered back. Is this a sensational rumor, a misread of complex data, or a real anomaly hiding in plain sight? In this video, we'll separate myth from mechanism, show you what real detectors see, and test whether an AI could ever issue a hard no. If there was a message, we'll ask, what could physics actually support, and what can't it? The veto that shook CERN. It begins with a claim that sounds like the opening scene of a science fiction thriller. CERN's predictive AI, nicknamed Prometheus, supposedly issued a desperate warning. The story goes that during preparations for a specialized run, 2 strange rogue particle signatures appeared in the beamline. Prometheus allegedly flagged the event with a 99.9% probability of something that no physics textbook dares to define, what insiders whispered as a reality state violation. The drama writes itself. The brightest minds in particle physics are confronted with an AI screaming "no" and choosing to push forward anyway. But before we get carried away, we need to draw a sharp line between storytelling and what's actually documented. Because here's the truth. There is no public record of any AI veto at CERN that matches this description. At CERN, layers of safety systems and human oversight govern every aspect of the Large Hadron Collider's operations. These aren't suggestions or soft rules, they are absolute, written into hardware and code. The collider itself is a marvel of engineering, a 27-kilometer ring of superconducting magnets, chilled to nearly negative 271 degrees Celsius, colder than outer space. It can only function because the particle beams travel inside an ultra-high vacuum where not even stray molecules of air are allowed. Every step is watched by a web of sensors, interlocks, and automated shutdown systems. The purpose isn't to predict the collapse of reality, but to protect the delicate machinery from quenching magnets, pressure spikes, or vacuum leaks. These are the dangers CERN deals with on a daily basis, not reality violations. So what could a veto realistically mean? In collider language, a veto is shorthand for any system that forces the experiment to pause or stop. This could be a beam dump, a controlled shutdown of the particle stream if magnets stray out of alignment. It could be an interlock trip triggered by a power surge, a fault in the cryogenics, or a pressure threshold in the vacuum tube. These events aren't rare or mysterious. They are expected safeguards designed to prevent catastrophic damage. In fact, the LHC's operational history includes several high-profile shutdowns caused by ordinary factors. A magnet quench in 2008 nearly destroyed the machine. That is why the protection systems exist. So, when someone tells you the AI issued a veto, the realistic interpretation is that a machine or model flagged conditions that required a pause. What it did not do is calculate a 99.9% chance of rewriting the laws of existence. Still, the narrative insists the warning was ignored. According to the story, scientists bypassed the AI's alarms and pushed ahead. When the particles collided, something unexpected happened. The detectors, usually flooded with a torrent of data, allegedly went silent. Instead of chaotic sprays of subatomic debris, they say a single structured packet pulsed through the system. It wasn't random noise, but a coherent pattern, elegant and terrifying. This is where the story makes its leap, from physics into myth. That data packet, the rumor claims, wasn't a mistake in the electronics. It was a message. Something, or someone, answered from the other side. But here's our ground rule going forward. If we are going to weigh this claim, we have to test it against how CERN's detectors and data systems actually behave. The ATLAS, CMS, ALICE, and LHCb experiments are massive, multinational efforts designed to capture everything from routine collisions to the faintest anomalies. Their data doesn't emerge as crisp messages, but as complex distributions of energy, particle tracks, and probabilities. If a genuine anomaly appeared, it would need to be cross-checked, repeated, and statistically significant before anyone dared call it new physics. The claim of an AI veto and a coherent reply makes for a gripping tale. But to understand whether a forbidden collision could even be possible, we need to strip away the myths and look at what a real particle collision looks like: the chaos, the probabilities, and the rare patterns that hint at new physics. And that takes us directly to the next question. If this mysterious event really happened, how do we know when a collision is truly odd and when it's just physics being physics inside a forbidden collision? To understand why the forbidden collision story catches so much attention, we need to step inside the machine itself and look at what a real particle collision actually is. Forget the image of two billiard balls cracking neatly against each other and sending sparks in a predictable arc. At the quantum level, collisions aren't tidy. They're messy, probabilistic, and often downright chaotic. When two protons collide inside the Large Hadron Collider, the outcome isn't determined by a simple equation. Instead, the results are described in terms of probabilities: what might happen, how often it could happen, and how the debris from that collision spreads across the detectors. Even if scientists set up two identical runs, lining up the beams with astonishing precision, they won't get the same result twice. Each collision is like rolling a pair of loaded dice billions of times, and slowly watching the statistics reveal a deeper truth. The real signals aren't found in single miracle events, but in the patterns that emerge across thousands, sometimes millions, of recorded collisions. This unpredictability is partly because protons are not simple, indivisible particles. They're more like tiny bags of chaos, quarks and gluons, swirling in a constant, dynamic dance. Physicists call this the quark-gluon soup. When two protons meet head-on at near-light speed, they don't collide as whole units. Instead, their constituent parts, called partons, smash into each other in all sorts of unpredictable ways. Sometimes an up quark slams into another up quark. Other times a gluon collides with a down quark, and often nothing lines up cleanly at all. The collisions produce showers of secondary particles, cascading like sparks from a grinding wheel. These fragments then decay further, transforming into entirely new particles before they can even be measured. By the time the detectors pick up the results, scientists are not seeing a single clean story of particle A met particle B. They're reconstructing a crime scene from the debris left behind. And this is why one-off anomalies are suspicious. If someone claims that a single collision revealed a structured message or some impossible new state, it's worth remembering that physics doesn't work that way. Robust discoveries require statistics, cross-checks, and repetition, not isolated flashes of mystery. But what about the claim that during this supposed forbidden collision, the detectors went completely silent, only to spit out a single coherent data packet? On the surface, that sounds chilling, like the universe itself held its breath and then spoke directly. But here's the technical reality. Silence inside a detector doesn't necessarily mean reality broke down. It can also mean the detector's triggers or filters temporarily cut off what was being recorded. Each of the LHC's massive detectors, the ATLAS, CMS, ALICE, and LHCb, takes in an overwhelming flood of information during every run. If scientists tried to save all of it, the data stream would be unmanageable. So they use trigger systems, carefully designed to filter out what's considered ordinary background noise and only record events that look interesting. Sometimes this means that for a brief window, the detectors seem quiet, not because nothing happened, but because the system chose not to record that specific noise. Even stranger effects can occur when data buffering or synchronization issues come into play. A structured packet could easily arise from a software artifact, a glitch in the way information was stored, compressed, or transmitted across the system. To scientists, this doesn't look like a message from another dimension. It looks like a misalignment in timing or a hiccup in electronics. And crucially, even rare signals that seem extraordinary still leave footprints in multiple detectors. That's how scientists confirm that what they're seeing is real and not just a phantom blip. If a coherent packet appeared only once, without matching traces across different subsystems, the odds are far higher that it was a technical quirk rather than a whisper from the void. That's why the so-called forbidden collision stands on shaky ground. In physics, one event never makes a discovery. Only repeated, consistent, statistically overwhelming evidence does. So when we hear stories of a single silenced collision producing a message, it's more folklore than verified science. Still, the rumor forces us to ask a compelling question. If anomalies can be dismissed so easily, could an AI really predict them in advance? Could a machine simulate trillions of scenarios, see ahead of human understanding, and stop a collision not because of magnets or vacuums, but because the physics itself was unsafe? That's the challenge we'll face in the next section. What role could an AI actually play at CERN? And is it even possible for a machine to veto physics itself? Could an AI actually say no? The idea of a machine screaming "stop" in the face of humanity's most powerful scientific experiment is gripping. It sounds like the digital equivalent of a prophet standing in front of the particle beams, warning of unseen catastrophe. But when we peel back the story and look at how CERN actually works, the truth is more grounded and just as fascinating. First, let's talk about what predictive tools really can do at the Large Hadron Collider. These systems run millions upon millions of simulations to anticipate how beams will behave. They calculate whether particles will stay in line, whether magnets can hold them, and whether the vacuum remains pure enough to prevent dangerous interactions with stray atoms. Predictive modeling is vital. For example, linear accelerators are used to boost particles before they're injected into the ring. The modeling ensures that injections happen at exactly the right energy levels, reducing the risk of instability. Similarly, simulations forecast how beams will spread and interact, which allows scientists to fine-tune conditions for safety and precision. In this sense, you could say CERN does rely on artificial intelligence or advanced algorithms to protect the experiment. But here's the key difference. These tools are designed to safeguard the machine, not to predict a reality failure. That phrase doesn't exist in operational handbooks. It's the language of rumor, not the language of physics. So where does the AI veto narrative actually come from? The closest real-world equivalent isn't some prophecy-like warning, but something much more practical. Interlocks. These are hard-coded safety systems built into every layer of the collider. If a magnet overheats, if the vacuum pressure rises, if the beam strays by even a fraction of a millimeter, the interlock kicks in and forces a shutdown. This is called a beam dump, and it's done automatically, without debate or interpretation. Human operators monitor these events, but they don't override them. That's how tightly the system is locked down. So while an AI or predictive model might forecast conditions look risky, the actual power to veto lies with the interlocks and machine protection systems. They operate on strict physics-based thresholds, not on simulations of existential collapse. This is where the story veers into rumor. The notion that an AI calculated a 99.9% chance of a reality violation sounds cinematic, but it doesn't match how CERN's systems are structured. If an internal model ever did generate a red flag, the response would be straightforward. It would be documented, reviewed, and logged for the record. That's how science works. And yet, no such log exists in any public CERN archive, technical report, or conference paper. The silence is telling. It strongly suggests that the dramatic AI veto either never happened or has been exaggerated through retellings. Still, we can allow for one narrow possibility. Perhaps internal predictive tools flagged an unusual risk in highly technical language, and over time, those warnings were retold outside of context. What began as a dry simulation note about unstable beam conditions could have snowballed into the myth of an AI screaming no. In other words, the AI veto might not have been prophecy. It may have been a misinterpretation, transformed by speculation into something far more mysterious. But if we set aside the idea of prophecy, we're left with the most haunting part of the story, the so-called message. Because even if the AI never really issued a supernatural warning, something else allegedly did happen when the particles collided. The detectors didn't just go silent, they supposedly delivered a coherent data packet that some researchers interpreted as a reply. A pattern, not random chaos. A whisper from the void. And that brings us to the next chapter. If not prophecy, what exactly was the message that people claim appeared inside the noise? And how would physics itself even begin to read one? The message in the noise. If the idea of an AI veto sounds improbable, the story of what came after is even stranger. According to the rumor, the collision didn't unleash the usual torrent of chaotic particle tracks. Instead, the detectors produced a single structured signal. When mapped, it supposedly revealed a three-dimensional geometric pattern, one that eerily mirrored carvings found on monoliths of a remote place, whispered about in restricted documents. Phantom Isle. For believers, this was no coincidence. They argued the signal was not noise, but a deliberate message. Yet here's the problem. LHC detectors don't generate neat symbols. They capture waveforms, hits, and reconstructed objects, raw data points that physicists later interpret through models. Turning that into a geometric emblem requires layers of subjective mapping. It's not impossible for a human analyst to impose shapes onto the chaos, but the leap from scattered data to an ancient symbol is more storytelling than science. Still, the story doesn't stop there. Alongside the alleged symbol was another startling claim: the appearance of a 28 giga-electron-volt bump. In the language of physics, a bump is a localized excess in the data, an unexpected spike in the probability distribution that might suggest the presence of a new particle. To those spreading the tale, this bump wasn't random. They called it a recipe, a set of instructions embedded in the data for a particle that breaks all the rules. But in real science, one bump isn't enough. When teams report an anomaly, they calculate its statistical significance. A small bump might look intriguing in one dataset, but when the experiment is repeated, it often vanishes. This has happened many times before at CERN. An anomaly flares up in the data, sparks a wave of excitement, and then dissolves when more statistics are added. That's the nature of particle physics. Discovery isn't built on a single curve in a single run. It requires consistency across repeated experiments, ideally confirmed by independent teams. Without that, a bump is just background fluctuation dressed up as revelation. The most unsettling part of the claim is what the supposed new particle would mean if it were real. The rumors said its decay signature violated baryon number conservation, one of the most fundamental laws of physics. In simple terms, this law ensures that matter, the stuff making up you, me, and the stars, doesn't just vanish into nothingness. Break that law, and you've broken the stability of the universe. Physicists take such possibilities seriously, but here's the catch. If a particle really defied baryon conservation, it wouldn't hide in a single signal. It would reveal itself across multiple detectors and leave clear decay channels that could be tracked and reconstructed. ATLAS, CMS, LHCb, ALICE, all these massive experiments are designed to catch such phenomena. And if even one saw convincing evidence of baryon number violation, it would be the physics headline of the century. Yet no such claim has ever been published. No cross-experiment confirmation has ever been logged. Extraordinary claims demand extraordinary proof, and one odd diagram or one unverified bump is nowhere near enough. The message in the noise makes for an eerie story, one that blends myth with physics. But when you strip away the mystery, what remains is fragile, a possibly misinterpreted pattern, an unconfirmed bump, and a law-breaking particle that has never been independently observed. That doesn't mean science is closed to the possibility. It just means the bar for proof is far higher than rumor allows. And yet, the whispers don't stop. Some say this supposed particle didn't just break conservation laws, it bent something even more sacred: the arrow of time. Could a collision inside CERN's tunnels actually distort causality itself? That's where we turn next, into the strange world of time asymmetry, where effects sometimes don't follow causes in the way we expect. Does the LHC bend time? One of the most haunting twists in the forbidden collision narrative is the suggestion that CERN may have briefly bent the flow of time itself. The claim usually surfaces like this: the so-called message wasn't simply a strange particle signature, but evidence that cause and effect had scrambled. To believers, it looked as if the universe had briefly stopped obeying its own arrow of time. But does real physics give us any reason to think time can bend in a collider? The answer is both fascinating and sobering. Let's begin with what's real. Physicists at CERN have indeed observed something unusual: CP violation. CP stands for charge parity, a symmetry that says particles and their mirror image antiparticles should behave identically. But in rare decays, that symmetry breaks. The LHCb experiment specializes in measuring these tiny asymmetries, and the results suggest the universe has a preferred direction, a bias that tilts matter just slightly in favor of survival. Without CP violation, the early universe might have destroyed itself in a perfect balance of matter and antimatter. So in a way, CP violation is why you and I exist at all. But make no mistake, this isn't science fiction time travel. It's not even a machine bending the present into the past. It's a subtle statistical imbalance, a quiet nudge in how particles decay. And it happens everywhere, not just at CERN. So where does the idea of scrambled cause and effect come in? Here, the rumors blur instrumentation with physics. Inside the LHC, detectors process unimaginable torrents of data. Each collision produces a spray of particles in less than a billionth of a second, and the detectors must sort, timestamp, and categorize them instantly. Local triggers are used to decide which events are worth keeping, and sometimes those triggers can shift the recorded order of events by fractions of a microsecond. To a casual observer, it might look like something happened before it should have, as if cause and effect reversed. But that isn't the universe breaking down. It's simply the electronics juggling data. Scientists know these quirks well, and they design systems specifically to correct them. That's why the retrocausal interpretations don't hold up. CERN's detectors are synchronized with astonishing precision. Atomic clocks, GPS timing, and redundant synchronization systems ensure that every recorded event can be placed on a consistent timeline. If a packet of data seems to arrive after the fact or looks out of order, the first suspects are buffering, latency, or calibration, not reality bending. It's similar to watching a live stream that glitches for a moment. The images might skip, or sound may lag behind video, but you don't assume time itself broke. You assume the feed stuttered. In particle physics, the principle is the same, only backed by far more rigorous checks. And yet, the myth persists. Maybe it's because time itself feels fragile, almost mystical, and when something as powerful as the LHC is involved, it's easy to imagine that the normal rules could bend. But the evidence shows otherwise. CP violation hints at asymmetry, not reversal. Trigger quirks can shuffle data, but they don't shuffle causality. And synchronization protocols are built precisely to prevent false impressions of retrocausality. So if the message after veto stories lean on time tricks, they stand on shaky ground. Which brings us to a bigger question. If the main collider ring has never offered conclusive proof of bending time or messages from the void, what about the other experiments? Because CERN isn't just one machine. Scattered around the ring and beyond are detectors built for stranger hunts, setups designed to search for long-lived particles, magnetic monopoles, and hidden sector ghosts. They don't get as much press as the Higgs boson, but in the world of rumor, they carry enormous weight. So, if the main ring gave us nothing definitive, could the real clues be hiding in CERN's so-called ghost hunting experiments? Phaser, Moidal Mapi, Mathusla. When most people think of CERN, they picture the massive 27-kilometer ring where protons smash together at nearly the speed of light. But hidden in the shadows of that giant machine are other experiments, less famous, but in some ways even stranger. These are the so-called ghost hunting detectors. And unlike the myths of AI vetoes and forbidden collisions, these setups are very real. Take Phaser, for example, the forward search experiment. Installed in a service tunnel, it's positioned to catch particles that fly forward, straight down the beamline, instead of exploding outward where the main detectors sit. Phaser is hunting for long-lived particles, the kinds that barely interact with normal matter and could slip through the big detectors unseen. Then there's Moidal Map, an experiment built to look for the truly exotic magnetic monopoles, particles with only one magnetic pole, and milli-charged states, particles carrying a fraction of electric charge. Discovering either would upend fundamental physics, and looming in the design stage is Mathusla, a massive surface detector that would sit above the collider, patiently waiting for extremely long-lived particles to decay after escaping the underground ring. Together, these experiments probe what physicists call the hidden sector, a shadow world of particles that standard detectors might miss. This is where the forbidden collision story folds in another layer of intrigue. Some versions claim that when the main detectors supposedly went silent, a faint low-energy neutrino-like pulse was picked up in sync with the event. Imagine it. The core of CERN goes dark, and somewhere off to the side, a whisper of energy flickers into life. If that were true, it would be intriguing indeed. But here's the reality. Such a claim would demand archival checks, independent confirmation, and detailed public notes. That's how science works. A single uncorroborated pulse doesn't prove anything. Without official records and multiple detections, it remains speculation, not discovery. So why does this matter at all? Because the things these ghost hunters are chasing, dark photons, axion-like particles, and long-lived states, are serious targets in modern physics. These aren't fantasy. They're theoretically well-motivated and could help explain some of the biggest puzzles in the universe, from dark matter to why fundamental forces behave the way they do. If something weird really did appear during a collider run, here's what would happen.
Multiple subsystems would be checked, data from independent detectors would be cross-analyzed, and collaborations across CERN would be mobilized.
Rumors fade quickly if they can't be verified. Anomalies survive only if they leave consistent, repeated footprints. That's the real ghost hunt, the careful, grinding, methodical chase for patterns that don't vanish when you look at them twice. The scientists behind Phaser, Moidal Map, and Mathusla aren't chasing fairy tales. They're building traps for the faintest hints of physics beyond the standard model. And if one day a genuine signal emerges, a particle that pierces through rock like a ghost, or decays hours after the collision that birthed it, the discovery would reshape our understanding of reality. But this raises a difficult question. If the risks of probing the unknown are real, or even if they're only rumored, why keep pushing? Why keep colliding particles, running ghost hunts, and building ever larger machines? The answer is both simple and unsettling, because this is where the big answers live. Yet chasing those answers means facing the possibility of risks that no one fully understands. And that brings us to the final part of our journey: the debate over risk, ethics, and what CERN should do next. What happens next? Whenever stories about CERN's forbidden collisions surface, one question always follows. Are we playing with fire? The idea that colliding particles could unravel reality sounds terrifying. But before we spiral into apocalyptic visions, it's important to remember how carefully the Large Hadron Collider is designed. The LHC isn't a reckless gamble, it's an engineering masterpiece built with layered safeguards. The vacuum system ensures that protons don't interact with stray matter. The superconducting magnets, cooled to near absolute zero, keep beams locked in place. If something strays even slightly, beam dumps kick in and safely absorb the energy. And behind it all are rigorous review processes, layers of redundancies, and teams of experts who think about safety first, discovery second. The much-discussed vacuum decay scenario, the idea that a collision could puncture reality's fabric, is not part of daily operations. It's a theoretical extreme, raised by physicists as a thought experiment, not as a practical danger. So why keep pushing if the unknown carries even hypothetical risks? Because the same experiments that inspire rumors are also the ones that changed science forever. Without the LHC, we wouldn't have confirmed the Higgs boson, the elusive particle that gives mass to matter. Without its collisions, we wouldn't have the precision tests that keep refining the standard model, or the insights that guide us toward physics beyond it. The progress has been steady, peer-reviewed, and public. There is no secret switch that flips the universe into chaos. There are only slow, careful steps into the unknown. Steps that humanity has always taken, from the first telescopes to the most powerful colliders. That brings us to how extraordinary claims should be handled. If an anomaly appears, whether it's a rumored message or an unexpected bump in the data, it must face the gauntlet of science. That means releasing the raw data, checking it across multiple experiments, and repeating the measurements. ATLAS, CMS, LHCb, and ALICE all watch the same collisions in different ways, and any real signal should leave traces in more than one. Independent verification is the cornerstone. If a claim can't survive cross-examination, it fades into rumor. But if it does survive, if the anomaly repeats across datasets, across detectors, and across time, then it becomes science. That's how the Higgs was confirmed, and that's how any new discovery, no matter how shocking, will be recognized. In that light, the whispered story of an AI veto and a terrifying reply is less about danger and more about the human hunger for mystery. The reality is both more cautious and, in many ways, more inspiring. CERN's work isn't about shortcuts or secrets. It's about slowly peeling back the layers of the universe, with full awareness that the risks must always be measured, minimized, and made public. If you enjoy deep dives that separate hype from hard facts, like, comment, and subscribe. Tell us, do you think a genuine anomaly hid behind a dramatic story? Or was it a misread of complex systems? When you're done, watch the next video on screen for more hidden sector hunts and how detectors catch the faintest whispers of new physics